Welcome back to the workshop. We encountered a problem on this pre-war engine. Already had some problems with pistons and rings before, and we're just preparing to fit the rings, and we noticed that the rings themselves are generally okay except for the oil control ring, and on some of the pistons the oil control ring seems to vary in its depth below the actual groove itself, into the groove itself below the lands. I was concerned that we wouldn't have, once expansion had taken place, that we wouldn't have enough clearance then in the bore. The rings themselves, the gaps are all fine, we've set the gaps, but it's this clearance once it all expands. So we look closely at the rings, and this ring, it's not held firmly in the vise, I can roll it through. The actual rings themselves they actually are varying in depth. So if I measure across here and then perhaps randomly over here, I might have a 6, 7, 8 thou variation in that short distance. I was hoping it was just one ring, but close inspection, they all have a tendency to be like that, although the ones we're using for number 2 are a little bit better. Because of the situation with this engine and because of the rarity of parts, we can have rings made and we can try to find some more oil control rings that we can adapt from something else. But time is really going on, and the owner is really in need of his engine, and it just really shows that it's tricky. Sometimes you think you're on the sort of homeward run, and then you can easily encounter a problem at any point. I have an inspection sheet here. This isn't for this particular engine, but we work from an inspection sheet for each stage. There's an inspection and there's a pre-build sheet just to double check that we've done everything correctly. I don't actually have this on my inspection sheet, so I don't have to check the ring depth and the groove depth. We do a cursory check, but to do an absolutely thorough check all the way around the ring, I don't have that on the list. So that's something now for me to put down in the future. I've been building engines for over 30 years, and we've done well over 75 different marks of unusual engines, mostly pre-war, a few post-war, and I've never actually encountered this variation problem before, so this is a new one on me. So after lots of thinking what was best to do, and again considering the situation with budgets and with time scales, I've decided that we will carefully, and have been carefully, filing, if you can see, carefully draw filing in here in the ring, and then after just going through a stage of draw filing, it was very time consuming trying to measure consistently and taking notes and everything. But I found actually if I can show you one-handed, if I slip this ring, I'm afraid I haven't got a steady hand, I need 2 hands for this, but if I slip this ring in here, I can move it across. Obviously my hand isn't steady using just the left hand, but I can carefully then do a comparison test ring for ring and different positions around the ring as well. So dropping it into this V block and just wiping it through on the dial gauge has really speeded up the process. So to sum it all up, I think we still really have to go very carefully even on this homeward run. And of course, typically this isn't the most easy engine to take rings off and put rings on, because we have to enter the conrods from and piston assembly from underneath, because they're pinch bolt pistons, and then push them up through the top of the deck, put the rings on, and then push them back down to connect to the conrod. So, unknown aftermarket parts. These particular ones came from France, and there's quite a lot of extra arrows. And again, really typically I feel uncomfortable to passing it all onto the customer. It would cost a fortune. So I've just spent this weekend catching up, really doing all this ring work, which won't get charged, just so that I can try and catch up so we don't get further behind schedule, and allows me a chance as well to fit in the other work that's waiting in the wings. So just a note for you, and hopefully we're able now through the week to rebuild the engine, finish rebuilding the engine, and cap it off with the head, and it can go back to the owner. Thank you for looking. One note that I didn't mention a little bit earlier, if anybody's concerned, when we fettle these rings, as I say, we draw file them, and then I have oil stones, and so I finish off with an oil stone. But it was my concern that I wouldn't be able to keep that face true and parallel with this outer face. But again, because of being able to measure the sweep through with the dial gauge, you can keep these remarkably true, and using it here, just by supporting it with my finger and just working here against the parallel jaws of this vise, it's surprising how true you can keep it. And then you can just finish off by checking how true it is across and parallel with the outer face, and just dress it accordingly. But amazing how square it starts off before you sort of do a finishing dress. And then right at the very end, which I've managed to, yes, I have a burnishing tool here. This is the sort of tool that you would use in clock making and things like that, for burnishing steel pivots and that sort of thing. And I give the cast iron ring a very final burnish with this tool, which just makes sure that the ring has a really nice square accurate end finish, which actually is quite a lot better than these original rings. I don't think you can see, but they are full of grooves and burrs. We always have to dress off burrs off of these cheaper rings in here anyway. That's part of our checklist, part of our routine. But these rings are pretty chewed up on the inside by the passing of the machine tool originally. So that's it. Thank you for watching.